So what if the very behavior that your parents drilled into you, to show respect, like say lowering your eyes when a senior executive enters the room, or downplaying your own accomplishments, what if that is the exact reason you just failed your job interview?
I mean, it's a brutal realization, right? You spend your entire life mastering this specific cultural currency, learning how to be a quote unquote good professional in your home country.
Right.
And then suddenly you step into an American corporate office and, well, that currency is essentially completely counterfeit.
Yeah, and that silent, invisible mismatch is exactly what we are unpacking today. So welcome to the deep dive.
We are so glad you're here.
Absolutely. Whether you are, commuting through the freezing winds of downtown Chicago right now, or maybe you're studying late into the night at a cafe in Ho Chi Minh City, or honestly, if you're just insanely curious about the hidden mechanics of how human beings evaluate each other under pressure, this conversation is custom tailored for you. You are our resident learner, and we are thrilled you're tuning in.
Yeah, the terrain we're navigating today is just fascinating because it's something almost everyone experiences in some form, yet very few people take the time to truly understand the underlying machinery of it.
Oh, for sure. So let's look at the source material we have today. We are looking at this highly detailed script, and it has an accompanying video description and vocabulary notes. And it's all from an advanced C2 English learning program.
Right, which means it's high-level stuff.
Extremely high level. Just to give some context, this specific program is explicitly designed for international professionals. So we're talking about folks on H-1B visas, which, if you don't know, are the primary work visas in the U.S. for specialized skills like engineering and tech.
Yeah, and it's also for international students finishing up their degrees on OPT.
Right, the optional practical training that lets them work for a bit after graduation. It's for immigrants building a new life and advanced learners worldwide. And the ultimate goal of the source material is basically to help them crack the code of the American job interview.
But, our mission today goes way beyond just grammar or vocabulary. Like, we aren't here for an English lesson.
No, definitely not.
What we are really doing is an exploration of cultural psychology. We're going to deconstruct this incredibly high-stakes environment of the American job market and translate these unspoken cultural rules and invisible tripwires into a tangible playbook.
I love that, a tangible playbook. So let's start with that initial friction point we mentioned at the top. This idea that a silent, rigorous evaluation has already taken place before a single interview question is even asked.
Oh, the first impression. It happens instantly.
Right. The physical and energetic start of an interaction really sets a baseline. And the source material refers to this as cultural competence, but honestly, it looks more like a fundamental clash of virtues.
A clash of virtues. That is a really great way to put it because let's look at the stark contrast highlighted in our source.
Okay, let's do it.
In many countries around the world, and the text specifically calls out places like Vietnam, Japan, Germany, and India, modesty is not just polite. It is a deeply ingrained fundamental virtue.
Right. You are taught from childhood to downplay your achievements.
Exactly. You defer to seniority. If you did something great, you attribute it to the team or maybe to luck. You speak softly about your accomplishments because to do otherwise would be boastful. It'd be totally socially unacceptable.
Right. But then you transplant that highly competent, deeply respectful professional into the American corporate ecosystem, and, well, the friction is just immediate.
It really is.
Because in the U.S., the fundamental virtue in this specific context isn't modesty at all. It's self-advocacy. American interviewers fully expect you to speak confidently, directly, and articulately about your own accomplishments.
And this is exactly where the translation breaks down, because in the U.S., talking about how great you are at your job isn't viewed as arrogant, provided you have the facts to back it up, of course.
Right. You can't just make things up.
No, but it's expected. It shows self-awareness. If you don't advocate for yourself, the American interviewer doesn't sit across the table and think, wow, what a wonderfully modest and respectful candidate.
Yeah, what do they actually think?
They think this person lacks confidence or they just aren't very good at what they do.
Oh, wow. That is such a harsh disconnect. And the source actually uses a specific phrase here, cultural recalibration. And it just makes me think about the immense cognitive load this places on a non-native candidate.
The cognitive load is staggering.
I mean, you're sitting in that chair and you have to consciously, forcefully override your own natural instincts. Everything your culture taught you makes you a quote-unquote good person has to be paused.
Yeah, you're managing your vocabulary, your grammar, your tone, your posture, your facial expressions, and your cultural output all at the exact same time. It's a lot.
It's exhausting just thinking about it.
Let's look at the physical reality of this. The source lists the absolute non-negotiables for American corporate culture. We're talking about a firm handshake, a warm smile, and direct eye contact.
And this applies whether you are physically walking through a glass door into a boardroom or if, your face is suddenly popping up on a Zoom screen.
Exactly. The medium doesn't matter. The rules are the same.
I want to focus on the eye contact piece for a second because that seems to be where the cultural friction is just the most visceral. Why is eye contact such a loaded variable in human interaction?
Well, if we look at this through an anthropological lens, in many Asian and Middle Eastern cultures, sustaining direct, unbroken eye contact, especially with the fear of authority or seniority, is actually an aggressive act.
Right, it's like a challenge.
Yeah, it signals confrontation. It's a challenge to their authority. So a respectful candidate will naturally avert their gaze slightly downward to show deference.
But in the American context, averting your gaze triggers the exact opposite reaction.
Completely opposite.
The American interviewer's brain has been culturally conditioned to interpret the avoidance of eye contact as a massive red flag. They assume you are hiding something. They read it as dishonesty or deep insecurity or just a total lack of interest in the job.
Yeah, it's wild how the exact same physical action means two entirely different things.
It actually reminds me of a legal trial where the candidate is forced to be both the defense attorney and the star witness. And, if the witness won't look the jury in the eye, the jury assumes they're lying, regardless of whatever evidence is presented.
That trial analogy is incredibly apt because you are simultaneously making the argument for your own value and standing as the primary evidence of that value. And the rules of evidence in this trial are highly, highly specific.
Right.
And, the high wire act of managing all this continues right into the very first words you speak. The source material gives a very specific example of how to execute the verbal greeting correctly.
Oh, yeah. Let's look at that. The example greeting in the text is, quote, "Hi, Sarah. It's really great to meet you. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me today." End quote.
Okay, let's dissect that because it is definitely not just polite filler. It is a deliberate trio of tactical choices.
A trio. Okay, walk us through it.
First, notice the use of the first name. Hi, Sarah. In many cultures, calling a senior executive by their first name upon first meeting them would be totally unthinkable.
Oh, yeah. You would use a title. You'd say Director Smith or Mr. Johnson.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But in the U.S., first names are standard across almost all levels of a corporation.
It flattens the power dynamic, doesn't it? I feel like Americans generally seem to prefer the illusion of equality, even when a strict hierarchy definitely exists.
That's a great point.
They want to feel like they are collaborating with a peer rather than, commanding a subordinate.
They absolutely do. The egalitarian ideal is deeply baked into American corporate culture, even if it's purely symbolic.
Right. So what's the second tactic?
The second tactic in that greeting is expressing genuine enthusiasm. It's really great to meet you. It projects high energy and engagement.
Okay, and the third?
And the third tactic is showing gratitude. Thank you so much for taking the time to sit down with me.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, this trio, collegiality, enthusiasm, and gratitude, it works together to establish immediate, warm rapport. It signals to the interviewer that you are culturally fluent and socially calibrated.
Okay, so you physically survived the first 30 seconds without looking at your shoes. You smiled, you used their first name, you established that baseline of trust.
You're off to a good start.
Right. And now someone actually opens their mouth to ask a question. And it's almost never a hard technical question first. It's the most ubiquitous, seemingly innocent prompt in the entire professional world.
Oh, I know exactly what's coming.
Yeah.
So tell me about yourself.
Tell me about yourself. It sounds so casual. It sounds like you're just chatting over coffee. But the source frames this as a massive trap.
It is a massive trap, mostly because of how candidates typically interpret the word yourself.
How so?
Well, the most common pitfall is treating this prompt as an invitation to recite an autobiography. The candidate starts at the very beginning. They talk about where they grew up. They meander chronologically through their entire educational history, their first internship, their second job, and they just ramble for 7 or 8 minutes.
And meanwhile, the interviewer has your resume literally sitting right in front of them. They don't need a chronological recitation of facts they can already read. I imagine their eyes just glaze over.
They completely disengage. I mean, when a candidate does this, it derails the interview immediately because it shows a lack of structural discipline. You aren't separating the signal from the noise.
So what is the lifeline here? How do we fix this? Because the text provides a highly structured solution that American interview coaches swear by, and it's called the present, past, future framework.
Yes. This framework completely reorganizes the narrative arc. Instead of starting at the beginning of your life, you start with the present.
Okay, the present meaning what exactly?
Meaning who you are professionally right now. What is your current title? And what is your core competency today?
Got it. And then the past.
Right, then you briefly touch on the past. You give just enough context to show how your previous experience logically built the skills you have today.
Okay, and finally, the future.
Finally, you pivot to the future. Why this specific role at this specific company is the inevitable next chapter in your career story.
Okay, I have to stop you there and push back on a detail the text emphasizes, because it says there is a strict, non-negotiable time limit for this entire pitch.
Oh, yes, there is.
You have to deliver this entire present, past, future narrative in just 60 to 90 seconds.
That's right.
I mean, that sounds incredibly reductive. Are interviewers actually looking for the most competent engineer or marketer, or are they just looking for the smoothest talker? If I condense my entire 10-year career into 90 seconds, aren't I leaving out all the nuance?
It's a very fair challenge. And honestly, it's exactly what feels unnatural to someone who wants to be thorough and accurate. But here is the underlying logic. The interviewer isn't testing your history in that 90 seconds.
What are they testing then?
They're testing your executive function. They're testing your strategic communication.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, if you could distill your own complex, nuanced career into a tight, highly relevant 90-second narrative, it proves to the interviewer that you can also distill complex business problems into clear, actionable summaries for your future boss or for a client. It's really an audition for how you communicate under pressure.
Oh, wow. That reframes it completely. It's not just a summary. It's a demonstration of business acumen.
Exactly.
Let's look at the line-by-line analysis of the example provided in our source material to see how this actually sounds in practice. The text gives a hypothetical scenario of a candidate who is currently a senior marketing specialist at a SaaS company in Seattle.
Right, and SaaS, meaning software as a service, basically companies that host applications over the internet.
Right, and they are interviewing for a tech job down in Austin, Texas. So here is how their 90-second pitch sounds. Quote, "Currently, I'm a senior marketing specialist at a mid-sized SaaS company in Seattle, where I've been leading our content strategy and managing a team of 4.
Let me jump in right there. Let's break down exactly why this elevator pitch works so well on an American hiring manager.
Yeah, go for it.
First, it hits the ear quickly and clearly. There's no wasted breath. It moves immediately into the present and establishes authority.
And then it immediately brings in numbers. Notice the specific phrases, managing a team of 4, and later they mention a 30% increase. Why is American corporate culture so obsessed with quantifiable metrics?
Because American business culture is deeply, deeply rooted in empiricism and the concept of meritocracy. It's a low-context culture.
A low-context culture, what does that mean?
Well, in high-context cultures, trust is built through long-term relationships and shared communal understanding. But in the U.S., trust is often built through data. Interviewers don't just want to hear that you are, good at marketing. That's a subjective opinion. They want the data that proves it. Numbers provide an objective anchor of reality to your claims.
I see. It's the difference between saying, I'm a fast runner and I run a 5-minute mile. One is an opinion, the other is a verifiable fact.
Perfectly said.
Let me read the next part of their pitch. Over the past 5 years, I've developed a deep expertise in data-driven marketing, and my campaigns have consistently delivered a 30% increase in qualified leads year over year.
See, there's the past, and there's the verifiable data.
Right. And then the pitch ends with the future component. What really excites me about this opportunity at your company is your commitment to innovation in the AI space, and I'm eager to bring my experience in scaling marketing operations to help drive your next phase of growth.
Which is brilliant, because it proves you aren't just looking for any job to pay the bills. You are looking for this specific job. You have researched their strategic direction. You are showing them your forward thinking.
Okay, so a 90-second intro sounds great, but, talk is cheap. Once you've claimed you're an AI innovator or a marketing genius who increases leads by 30%, how does the American interviewer actually verify that without, calling your old boss. You've established your narrative, but a narrative without proof is just fiction.
That is the pivotal transition in the interview. Because once the high-level summary is established, the interviewer shifts into hunting for concrete proof. And this brings us to the core philosophy of American behavioral interviewing.
Behavioral interviewing?
Yes. The source material states this explicitly, and it really is the bedrock of modern U.S. hiring practices. Past behavior is the strongest predictor of future performance.
Meaning they don't care what you might do, they only care what you have done.
Yes, exactly. Interviewers in this framework do not care about hypotheticals. If they ask, how would you handle a difficult client? And you give a theoretical answer like, well, I would listen to their concerns and I would try to find a compromise. That answer is practically worthless to them.
Because anyone can make up a perfect response in theory.
Right. Anyone can invent a theoretical response. They demand evidence-based narratives of what you have actually done when the pressure was on.
Which introduces us to the gold standard of interview techniques for answering these behavioral questions. If you've spent any time prepping for interviews, you've probably heard of the STAR method.
STAR. Situation, task, action, result.
Exactly. It's the formula you're supposed to use when the interviewer hits you with a question that starts with, tell me about a time when, or give me an example of a situation where...
The STAR method is essentially an architectural blueprint for storytelling. It ensures you deliver exactly the kind of evidence the interviewer is hunting for, without getting lost in all those irrelevant details.
Let's look at the deep dive our source takes into a specific example.
Okay.
The scenario is this. The interviewer asks, quote, tell me about a time you had to deal with a difficult colleague or a challenging team dynamic, end quote. I mean, I always feel like this is a massive trap.
Oh, it feels like a total trap.
Right. If I complain about my old coworker, I look bitter and difficult to work with. But if I claim I've never had a difficult colleague, I look like I'm either lying or I have zero actual experience.
It is a very delicate balance. You have to prove you can handle conflict without sounding like you were the source of the conflict.
Yeah.
So let's deconstruct the STAR response provided in the text to see how it threads that needle. We start with situation.
Okay, so for the situation, the candidate says, in my previous role, I was assigned to a cross-functional project team where 2 senior engineers had a fundamental disagreement about the technical architecture, and it was creating significant tension that was stalling our entire timeline.
Notice the neutrality here.
Yeah, very neutral.
In just one sentence, the candidate has set the scene and established the stakes the timeline is stalling. But they identified the conflict without insulting anyone. 2 senior engineers just had a, quote, fundamental disagreement. It's objective. It's highly professional.
Okay, so that's the S. Next is the task. What was the candidate's specific responsibility in this mess? So the candidate says, as the project lead, my task was to find a resolution that satisfied both perspectives without alienating either team member.
Highly focused. The candidate owns their role as project lead and defines a complex diplomatic goal. Resolution without alienation.
Right.
Now comes the most critical part, the action. What did the candidate actually do?
Right, the A. What I did was schedule individual one-on-one meetings with each engineer to understand their underlying concerns. I discovered that one was prioritizing scalability while the other was focused on speed to market. I then facilitated a joint workshop where we mapped out a hybrid approach that incorporated the best elements of both proposals.
This is where the interview is won.
Really? Just there?
Yes. Because the candidate outlines a sophisticated, multi-step analytical and diplomatic process. First, private de-escalation. Second, identifying the root business concerns, scalability versus speed. Third, bringing them back together for a collaborative workshop. I mean, it shows immense emotional intelligence.
Oh, wow, yeah, it does.
But the story isn't complete without the final letter. Result.
The R. Let's hear it. The result was that we not only met our original deadline, but actually delivered 2 weeks early. And the hybrid architecture ended up becoming the standard template for all future projects in the department.
The quantifiable, highly positive impact. They saved the deadline, they beat it by 2 weeks, and they created a lasting systemic improvement for the company.
You know, the specificity is what really makes it believable. Compare that to what a nervous, unprepared candidate might say. It's like, we had 2 engineers who were fighting, so I stepped in and got them to talk, and we got the project done. The vague answer requires the interviewer to just blindly trust your self-assessment. The STAR answer forces the interviewer to recognize your competence based on the facts presented.
And this is exactly why the cognitive load we discussed earlier is so incredibly high. You cannot invent a multi-layered narrative like that on the fly while actively translating cultural norms and vocabulary. You will stumble. You will lose the thread.
Which is why the source text advises you to prepare. But, we don't want to frame this as just doing your homework like you're studying for a vocab quiz. This is really about building a mental toolkit. The recommendation is to have 5 to 7 distinct STAR stories preloaded in your brain before you ever walk into the room.
You need to categorize those mental files too. You want a story that highlights your leadership. You want one for conflict resolution, like the engineer story we just analyzed. You need one that shows innovation, one that demonstrates teamwork, and crucially one about failure and recovery.
Failure.
Right. If you have this mental database, you are prepared for almost any behavioral question they throw at you. You just reach into your mental file cabinet, pull out the most relevant STAR story, and deliver the evidence.
Okay. So you've presented this incredible highlight reel of all your brilliant successes. You've used the STAR method to prove you are competent, diplomatic, and results-oriented. The interviewer is nodding along. But now they need to test the armor. They need to see how you react when you aren't talking about your victories. We're moving into the vulnerability test.
The ultimate pressure test. And it usually arrives in the form of the most dreaded question in the corporate world.
Let me guess. What is your greatest weakness?
What is your greatest weakness?
Ugh, just hearing that question makes my stomach drop.
It does for everyone.
And our source material points out that for international candidates, this is a profound cultural minefield.
Oh, absolutely. In many cultures, the very concept of admitting a weakness in a professional evaluative setting is deeply counterintuitive. It almost borders on shameful. I mean, if you are sitting in a room trying to prove you are the absolute best person for this job, why on earth would you willingly offer up your flaws? It feels like you are actively sabotaging yourself.
But the text makes it crystal clear. In the American context, this question is not a trap designed to find a reason to reject you.
No, not at all. American interviewers are not looking for perfection. They are fully aware you are a human being with flaws.
Thank goodness.
What they are looking for is maturity. This question is a deliberate, highly calibrated test of 3 things: self-awareness, intellectual honesty, and what psychologists call a growth mindset.
A growth mindset. Let's unpack that because it seems to be a core religion in American corporate culture right now.
It really is. A growth mindset is the belief that your abilities, your intelligence, and your flaws are not fixed traits. They are simply starting points for development. The interviewer wants to know, are you self-aware enough to accurately identify where you fall short? And more importantly, are you proactive enough to take ownership of that flaw and fix it?
But hold on, if they are testing my honesty, what about the classic workaround that everybody has tried at least once? The old disguise a strength as a weakness trick.
Oh no.
You know the one, like, oh, my greatest weakness, I'm just too much of a perfectionist, I work too hard, I care too much about the company's success. Doesn't that show them I have a great work ethic?
The source text is wonderfully blunt about this. Experienced American interviewers despise the perfectionist answer.
They hate it.
They see right through it. It is transparent, inauthentic, and evasive. It tells them absolutely nothing about your actual self-awareness or your capacity for growth. In fact, it damages your credibility because it feels like an insult to their intelligence.
Wow.
You are essentially telling them you think they're gullible enough to fall for a fake weakness.
Okay, so if I can't fake it, but I also shouldn't confess that I, sleep through my alarm 3 days a week, what is the winning strategy? How do I answer this honestly without torpedoing my chances?
The optimal strategy is what we can call the pivot to growth. You share a genuine, actual professional area of development, but you immediately frame it within a narrative of active, ongoing improvement.
Okay, let's look at the source's example for this. The candidate uses the concept of delegation. They say, quote, "Earlier in my career, I struggled with delegating tasks effectively. I had a tendency to take on too much myself because I wanted to ensure quality. But I recognized that this wasn't sustainable or scalable, so I invested in a leadership development course and started implementing a structured delegation framework with my team. It's been transformative. Not only has my team's output increased, but their professional development has accelerated as well."
That response is masterful because of the pivot. First, it acknowledges a very relatable, genuine flaw, struggling to delegate. Any hiring manager who has ever managed a team of high performers knows exactly what this looks like. It's a real weakness that causes real bottlenecks.
Right, it's honest.
But then the pivot happens. I recognize that this wasn't sustainable. That is the self-awareness kicking in.
And then comes the action. I invested in a leadership course and implemented a framework. They didn't just sit there and accept the flaw, they took initiative to close their own gap. It ends with proactive, measurable growth.
By the time you finish answering the weakness question using this method, the interviewer is actually left with a profound impression of your leadership potential. You've taken a question about your flaws and used it to demonstrate your maturity and your commitment to continuous improvement.
That is such a powerful flip. Okay, so you've navigated the first impression, you crushed the 90-second intro, you proved your skills with the STAR method, and you showed mature vulnerability. The formal questioning draws to a close. And suddenly, the power dynamic in the room just flips entirely.
The interviewer puts down their pen, leans back, and asks, "Do you have any questions for us?"
I always feel a sense of relief when they ask this, like the hard part is over. But the text gives a massive red alert warning here. If you reply with, "No, I think you've covered everything," the source calls that the kiss of death.
It really is.
Why is it so fatal to just be satisfied with the information they've given you?
Because an interview in the American context is expected to be a dynamic conversation, a mutual exchange of ideas. If you have no questions, it signals a severe lack of curiosity. It implies you haven't done any deep preparation regarding the company's future, and worst of all, it signals a lack of genuine interest in the role.
Because if you really wanted it, you'd want to know more.
Exactly. If you are truly excited about dedicating 40 or 50 hours a week to this organization, how could you possibly not have a single question about what it's going to be like?
But you can't just ask anything, right? If I ask, what exactly does this company do again? I'm going to look like an idiot. The source material reviews some high-level strategic questions that candidates should use to demonstrate that business acumen we talked about earlier.
Right, you want to ask strategic things.
Things like asking about the onboarding process and the success metrics for the first 90 days, or inquiring about team culture and cross-department collaboration.
There is one question recommended in the text that is particularly powerful, actually.
Oh, what is it?
What are the biggest challenges the team is currently facing? And how do you see this role contributing to overcoming them?
Oh, I love that. It forces the interviewer to visualize you in the role, actively helping them solve their biggest headaches.
Yes.
It positions you as a problem solver who is already strategizing on behalf of the company before an offer has even been made. It's almost like Inception. You're planting the idea of you saving the day in their head.
It demonstrates a very high level of business engagement. But the text also issues a vital warning about what not to ask in this phase. You must avoid asking about salary, vacation days, and benefits during this initial interview.
Oh wait, isn't that why we work? To get paid and take vacations? Why is it taboo to ask about the very thing that motivates employment?
It's really a question of sequencing. While compensation is obviously the fundamental transaction of employment, bringing it up at this specific moment in the American interview sequence sends the wrong signal. It creates the impression that you care more about the perks than the purpose.
Ah, I see.
You want to establish your undeniable value and your alignment with the company's mission first. The negotiation about salary and benefits comes later, often with HR or a recruiter, once the hiring manager has already decided they absolutely need you on their team. You maximize your leverage by waiting.
Okay, that makes total sense. Now, before we wrap up the core concepts, there is a major point of anxiety that the source addresses, and I am really glad it does, especially for international listeners.
Let's hear it.
It's the anxiety around accent and pronunciation. If English is your second, third, or fourth language, there is often this underlying fear that the moment you open your mouth, your accent is going to instantly disqualify you.
It's a very real anxiety, and it's rooted in the fear of being othered. But the source text delivers a deeply empowering thesis on this issue. It states explicitly, your accent is not your enemy. Unclear communication is.
Wow. Your accent is not your enemy. Unclear communication is. That is such a crucial distinction.
It is, because American corporate workplaces, particularly in sectors like technology, finance, engineering, and academia, are highly diverse. Hiring managers in major hubs like Silicon Valley, New York, or Austin are entirely accustomed to interacting with brilliant professionals from all over the globe.
Right.
Success in an American interview is not about trying to flatten your vowels to sound like you grew up in Ohio. It is about clear articulation. It's about logical sentence structure. It's about utilizing precise professional vocabulary.
And the text gives some incredibly practical advice on how to achieve that clarity, focusing specifically on pacing. When we get nervous, our adrenaline spikes and our natural biological instinct is to speed up. We try to rush through our answers just to get out of the spotlight.
We all do it.
But speeding up destroys clarity, especially if you are speaking in a non-native accent.
Because when you speed up, syllables bleed together, pronunciation suffers, and the cognitive load on the interviewer increases because they have to strain to process the information. The advice is to consciously slow down, breathe, give your words space.
It's so simple but so hard to do in the moment.
And the text points out something profound. Pausing before answering a question is not a sign of weakness or a lack of fluency. It is a sign of thoughtfulness. It shows you are actively considering the complexity of the question rather than just blurting out a rehearsed response.
Slowing down actually projects authority. Think about anyone who's truly in charge of a room. They never rush their words. They know people will wait for them to speak.
That's very true.
So, if you are walking into an interview tomorrow or next week, what mental tools should you be carrying with you? Based on the text, there are 3 major strategies you need to have locked in. First, you need your 90-second timeline. You must have your present, past, future narrative mapped out in your head, ruthlessly edited down to the essentials with quantifiable metrics attached.
Second, you need your mental file cabinet of star stories. 3 to 5 concrete examples of your past behavior highlighting leadership, conflict resolution, and growth from failure ready to deploy when they ask for proof.
And third, you need genuine curiosity. You need 3 thoughtful, strategic questions you can ask at the end of the interview to show that you are evaluating their business challenges just as closely as they are evaluating your resume.
If you internalize those 3 strategies, you are fundamentally shifting your position. You're moving from a passive participant who's just hoping to survive the interrogation to an active driver of the interview process.
And that leads perfectly into a final provocative thought that builds on everything we've discussed today. We've talked extensively about how you must adapt to the American interview culture, how you must recalibrate your modesty, translate your experiences, and offer up your vulnerabilities.
Right.
But remember, the source's premise: an interview is a two-way dialogue. You are evaluating the company just as much as they are evaluating you.
Exactly. Think about the dynamics of the weakness question we explored earlier. When you enter that room and you answer that question using the pivot to growth strategy, you are offering genuine vulnerability. You are demonstrating a growth mindset and a desire to improve.
Yeah.
Now, what does the interviewer's reaction to your carefully crafted, honest narrative tell you about the culture of their organization?
Wow, I never thought of it that way.
If you show vulnerability and self-awareness, and the interviewer reacts with harshness or judgment or lack of empathy, if they seize on your weakness as a reason to look down on you, what have you just learned? Hasn't the interview process just successfully warned you away from a toxic workplace?
That changes the entire perspective of the room. The weakness question isn't just their test for your maturity, it's your test for their culture. If they punish honesty and self-awareness in the interview, they're going to punish it on the job. You don't want to work there anyway.
Exactly.
That takes so much of the fear out of the process. You are an equal participant in this exchange. Well, to a resident learner, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive into the invisible mechanics of the interview room. Keep pushing those boundaries, trust in your own value, and go crush that next opportunity. We will catch you on the next one.
Imagine sitting in a perfectly air-conditioned office. Or, maybe you're just in your living room looking at a totally standard, seemingly harmless PDF document on your laptop screen.
Right, just a normal day.
Exactly. But suddenly your heart rate spikes to like 120 beats per minute. Your palms get clammy. Your breathing gets really shallow. You are experiencing a full-blown biological fight or flight response over an email.
Over an email, yeah. Because that is exactly what the prospect of salary negotiation does to the human brain.
That's wild.
It's a completely visceral reaction. And I mean, it is universal. Your nervous system isn't reacting to a physical predator in the room. It's reacting to the terrifying prospect of assigning a literal numerical value to your professional existence.
Yeah.
And then having to actually defend that number to a stranger who, frankly, holds the key to your livelihood.
Welcome to today's deep dive. We are so thrilled you're joining us today because our mission is to completely dismantle that panic. We are taking a stack of brilliant source material, specifically this advanced English communication guide that just ruthlessly dissects American corporate culture.
It really does.
And we are extracting the ultimate toolkit for you, the listener. We're going to look at the exact linguistics, the deep-seated psychology, and the underlying corporate mechanics of negotiating a salary in the United States.
And we are definitely not just going to give you generic, motivational platitudes like, know your worth.
Right. None of that.
We are going to reframe this completely terrifying confrontation into a highly structured, logical, million-dollar conversation. By the end of this session, you're going to have the exact vocabulary and the structural frameworks to confidently advocate for yourself.
Okay, so let's unpack this, because before we can even touch the tactical, how to, the exact phrases you should deploy or the emails you should draft, we really have to confront the why. Why does this specific topic make us absolutely lose our minds? When you actually look at the sociological data behind this, it isn't just some random human quirk. It's heavily dictated by our cultural programming.
Yeah, what's really fascinating here is the sheer global diversity in how we view the employer-employee relationship.
Okay, tell me more about that.
Well, if you look at professionals operating across East Asia, South Asia, or the Middle East, discussing compensation openly is incredibly fraught. In many of these cultures, pushing back on an initial job offer isn't just viewed as, aggressive. It's often perceived as deeply inappropriate.
Or even disrespectful, right?
Exactly. It can be seen as a violation of social harmony.
Right, because the power dynamic is viewed fundamentally differently in those contexts. You're looking at it through a lens of hierarchy and mutual obligation.
Precisely. In highly hierarchical cultures, if an authority figure the employer makes you an offer, the culturally conditioned, respectful response is to just accept it with gratitude.
Makes sense.
The underlying assumption is that the employer has benevolently determined what is fair. And to question that number is to basically question their integrity. It signals a lack of humility.
But then you take a professional who has spent their entire life internalizing that perfectly valid social contract, and you drop them into the hyper-individualistic machine of the United States corporate world.
Oh, it's a complete shock to the system.
A total 180-degree culture shock. Because in the U.S., salary negotiation isn't just an accepted practice. It is genuinely expected.
It is a fundamental gear in the machinery of the hiring process.
In fact, failing to negotiate in the U.S. can actively damage your professional reputation before your first day on the job.
Yeah, people don't realize that.
Let's say you just accept the first number they throw at you. You might think you're signaling to the hiring manager, hey, I'm easy to work with, I'm a team player.
Right.
But what the American hiring manager actually hears is, this person lacks confidence. Or worse, they have absolutely no idea what their actual market value is.
Which is a devastating miscommunication. You're trying to be polite, and they are literally writing you off as naive.
Wow.
But if we connect this to the bigger picture, the impact of staying silent isn't just reputational. It is mathematically staggering.
Okay, lay the math on us.
The data is incredibly clear on this. Individuals who successfully negotiate their starting salary end up earning, on average, over $1 million more over the course of their careers compared to those who just accept the initial offer.
Wait. $1 million.
$1 million.
You're telling me that pushing through 5 minutes of intense social discomfort is mathematically worth $1 million to the listener?
It is arguably the highest hourly rate work you will ever do in your entire life. And it is crucial to understand the hidden mechanics of why that number is so astronomical.
Right, because nobody is handing you $1 million check on day one.
Exactly. You aren't getting $1 million bump on Tuesday. It is all about the cascading, compounding financial impact of your baseline.
It's exactly like a snowball rolling down a hill. If you pack a snowball that is just, say, 5% larger at the very peak of the mountain, it gathers exponentially more snow with every single rotation. By the time it hits the bottom of the valley, that tiny initial difference has created a massive avalanche.
That's the perfect visualization. Think about how corporate compensation actually functions, right? Your base salary is the anchor for almost every other financial metric in your professional life.
Give me an example.
Let's say you get an annual merit increase of 4%. Well, that 4% is calculated strictly on your base. If your base is $10,000 higher because you negotiated on day one, your raise is higher in absolute dollars, and that repeats every single year.
And it doesn't start at the base salary. Your annual performance bonus is usually a percentage of your base. Your employer's 401k match is a percentage of your base.
Exactly. Your stock refreshers, your equity grants, they all scale from that initial starting number.
Right.
Furthermore, when you leave that company in 5 years to take a new job somewhere else, what is your new salary demand anchored to?
Your previous salary.
Yes. So a slightly higher baseline, negotiated at age 25 or 30, reverberates through every single paycheck, every bonus, and every compound interest calculation in your retirement account until the day you retire.
That is mind-blowing.
Yes.
But, it also leads me to a really obvious question. If this is so widely expected in the U.S., and if the financial consequences are literally $1 million, why do so many seasoned, highly educated, brilliant professionals still freeze up?
It's a great question.
I mean, I know executives who negotiate multi-million-dollar vendor contracts for their company every day,
Yeah.
but when it comes to their own salary, they turn to jelly.
Well, because intellectual knowledge does not easily override biological and cultural conditioning.
Wow.
Even if you cognitively know the math, your nervous system is screaming at you that you are engaging in a confrontation. You are actively risking rejection.
Right, the fight or flight kicks in.
Exactly. You are not just fighting the employer for more money. You are fighting your own internal programming. It requires a massive intentional exertion of willpower to override the instinct to just be grateful and stay quiet.
Okay, so we know the stakes are incredibly high, and we know we have to fight our own biological instincts. Let's get into the timeline. How does this actually play out in the real world? Because the hiring process is a marathon, not a sprint.
This is a critical strategic pivot. We have to look at the timeline of leverage. The golden rule of American hiring culture is incredibly clear. You must let the employer bring up compensation first.
Which is agonizing. Because if you're the candidate, you want to know immediately. You don't want to waste 6 weeks doing 4 rounds of technical interviews and panel presentations if the job pays half of what you need to survive.
It is completely agonizing. It requires immense patience. But bringing it up prematurely strips you of your primary weapon leverage.
Okay.
Now, the challenge here is that recruiters are specifically trained to extract your salary expectations as early as possible.
Oh, they always ask right away.
Always. In the very first phone screening, within the first 10 minutes, they will almost certainly ask, so, what are your salary expectations for this role?
And your instinct is to just blurt out a number, right? Because an authority figure asked you a direct question, and we are conditioned from childhood to answer authority figures. Plus, you want to seem cooperative.
Exactly. And you must resist that urge completely. You must diplomatically deflect. You cannot give them a tangible number at this stage because you simply do not have enough information to accurately price your labor.
Let's look at the exact script for this deflection, because this is advanced English communication at its absolute finest.
It really is.
If the recruiter asks for your number on day 1, you say, I'd really love to learn more about the full scope of the role and the responsibilities involved before discussing specific numbers.
What's so fascinating here is the precise linguistic construction of that sentence. Notice what you are not saying. You aren't saying, I won't tell you, which sounds combative and defensive. You are saying, I cannot accurately price my services until I understand the exact parameters of the problem you are hiring me to solve.
It frames you as a logical, thorough, analytical professional rather than an evasive job seeker.
Exactly.
Here's where it gets really interesting, though. Let me push back on this a little bit, because that script is great for a polite phone conversation.
Sure.
But what if the recruiter is sitting there looking at their internal software and they say, I hear you, but I literally have a blank field in my system with a red asterisk next to it. I cannot move you to the next round unless I type a number in this box. Just give me a ballpark. How do you hold your ground then without sounding hopelessly stubborn?
This is where you have to understand the psychology of leverage. At the initial phone screen stage, your leverage is essentially zero.
Zero.
They have a stack of 50 other qualified resumes sitting on their desk. If you give a number that is too high, you make their job easy. They just screen you out.
You're done.
But if you give a number that is too low, you have just permanently anchored your final offer to a lower tier, instantly costing yourself tens of thousands of dollars.
It's a trap.
It is a total trap. So if they push back and demand a number for their form, you pivot to mutual alignment.
How does that sound?
You follow up with, I'm confident that if We're a great mutual fit after the interview process. We'll be able to arrive at a compensation package that works for both sides.
Ah, you defer the conversation while simultaneously promising a collaborative outcome. You're basically saying, don't worry, I won't be unreasonable later, but I'm not giving you the number now.
Exactly. If they force you to enter a number on an online application form before you even speak to a human, the standard practice is to enter all zeros or a 1.
Just to bypass the form field.
Right. Or if it requires a realistic number, you put the absolute top of market rate, but the goal is always to defer the actual human conversation.
Okay, but why are we deferring? What is magically changing over the next few weeks?
Your leverage is changing. Your negotiating power increases dramatically after the company has invested heavily in evaluating you.
Oh, I see.
Think about the corporate mechanics of a hiring process. They fly you out, or they put you through 5 grueling rounds of video interviews.
Yeah, the endless Zoom calls.
Right. 4 different busy executives take an hour out of their day to evaluate you. The team holds a debrief meeting to discuss your candidacy. They finally reach a consensus and say, this is the person.
They fall in professional love with you.
Yes, and at that exact moment, they are heavily invested both logistically and emotionally. They have essentially closed the door on the other candidates.
Right.
They have psychologically pictured you doing the job. The absolute last thing that hiring manager wants to do is go back to the HR department and say, hey, we lost them, restart the 6-week search process, all over a slight discrepancy in the base salary.
That makes so much sense. By waiting, you are utilizing the sunk cost fallacy to your advantage. You are shifting the balance of power.
That moment, the moment the offer is officially extended, is your point of maximum leverage.
So let's play this out. You've survived the gauntlet. You get the call from the hiring manager. They say the magic words, we are thrilled to extend you an offer.
Best feeling in the world.
It is. In that split second, the relief is overwhelming. The adrenaline is pumping. You just want to scream, yes, I accept, thank you.
Which is the exact opposite of what you must do.
It's so counterintuitive. You've spent weeks trying to get this exact outcome, and the second they hand it to you, you're supposed to hit the brakes.
You must hit the brakes. The golden rule here is to buy yourself 1 to 3 days to evaluate the offer.
Okay.
When they give you the number on the phone, you express immense gratitude, you reaffirm your excitement about the team, but you explicitly ask for time to review the details in writing.
Now, I know the immediate fear here. The listener's probably thinking, if I don't say yes immediately, they're going to think I'm ungrateful. Or they'll assume I'm secretly interviewing with their biggest competitor and I'm just stringing them along.
That is the anxiety talking, not reality.
Right. Because there's a fascinating paradox here. By delaying your acceptance slightly to review a major legal and financial document, you aren't signaling hesitation.
Not all.
You are actually signaling to the employer that you are a thoughtful, deliberate, analytical professional. You are demonstrating the exact kind of rigorous decision-making skills they want you to use when you manage their projects.
It is a profound demonstration of professional competence. You are acting like a business partner, not a desperate job seeker. But, those 1 to 3 days are not a vacation. That is your strategic preparation window. You must use that time to determine your exact hyper-specific market value.
And this is where we have to look at the data. Because you can't just walk in and say, I want more money because I feel like it.
Never. Negotiation in the U.S. corporate ecosystem cannot be based on your feelings or your personal budget. It must be completely anchored in empirical third-party data.
And we have incredible tools for this now.
We really do. You should be scouring platforms like Glassdoor, PayScale, and LinkedIn Salary Insights. If you are in the tech sector, levels.fyi is absolutely critical because it breaks down total compensation granularly by level.
Oh, that's incredibly useful.
You can even look at macroeconomic data from the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
And when you are looking at this data, you have to be extremely careful about geography.
This is paramount. The data is highly dependent on massive geographic and cost of labor variables. A software engineer in San Francisco, California, commands a vastly different baseline salary than a software engineer doing the exact same job in Des Moines, Iowa.
The disparity is enormous. A salary that buys you a 4-bedroom house and a comfortable life in Des Moines might legally qualify you for housing assistance in San Francisco due to the staggering cost of living and the hyper-competitive local demand for tech talent.
Exactly. You cannot take a generic national average and apply it to a hyper-specific local market. You have to pinpoint exactly what a professional with your specific years of experience in your specific industry commands in that specific zip code.
Okay, so you've spent Tuesday and Wednesday doing your homework. You have your spreadsheets, you have your data points. You know definitively that the initial offer they gave you is 10% below the market median for your city.
Right.
You take a deep breath. It's Thursday. You get back on the phone. Now we arrive at the actual conversation. How do you structure this so it lands perfectly and doesn't blow up in your face?
This is where we deploy a very specific, highly refined linguistic structure. It's called the gratitude value ask framework.
Gratitude, value, ask.
Yes, it is a 3-step progression designed to psychologically disarm the employer while firmly asserting your worth.
I love a good framework.
Yeah.
Let's bring it down. Step 1, gratitude.
Step 1 is essential for setting the emotional tone of the meeting. You never start with the numbers.
Never.
You begin by intensely reaffirming your enthusiasm for the role. You say something like, I am so incredibly excited about this opportunity. Meeting the team during the interview process only reinforced that this is the perfect mutual fit, and I am eager to jump in and start contributing.
You are actively disarming their defensiveness. Because on their end, they are nervous too. They are worried you are about to reject them and ruin their hiring metrics.
Exactly. It frames the upcoming negotiation not as a battle between adversaries fighting over a pot of money, but as a collaborative problem-solving exercise between future colleagues. You are on the same side of the table.
So what does this all mean for step 2? Value.
Value is where you construct your objective business case. You remind them, briefly but powerfully, of your professional merit.
So we're reminding them why they liked you in the first place.
Right. You might cite your 7 years of specialized experience, or you might remind them of a specific metric you discussed in the interview, like the fact that you drove a 20% increase in measurable revenue growth at your last company.
But here is the critical cultural distinction that we really need to hammer home, because this trips up so many people. This value step must never, under any circumstances, include your personal financial needs.
This is a strict rule of American corporate culture. You cannot say, I need a higher salary because my rent in New York City is really expensive, or I have a lot of student loans I need to pay off, or I have a new baby on the way.
It sounds harsh, but the reality is the employer doesn't care.
They cannot care. The employer is paying for market value, not your personal obligations. Your cost of living is your problem. Your professional output is what they are buying. If you bring up your rent, you instantly look unprofessional.
It's exactly like selling a house.
Oh, I like this.
If you are selling your home and a potential buyer comes to look at it, you don't look at them and say, hey, I'm pricing this house at $50,000 above the neighborhood average because I really need the cash to buy a new sports car and pay off my credit cards.
Right.
The buyer would laugh in your face. They don't care about your sports car.
But if you say, I am pricing this house higher because it has a brand new roof, a fully renovated chef's kitchen, and completely updated plumbing, now the buyer listens. The focus must remain entirely on the value being transferred to them. That is a brilliant analogy. It is purely about the asset, which in this case is your brain and your time and the return on investment you will provide to the company. Once you have established that value, you move seamlessly to the final step. Step 3, the ask.
This is the terrifying part, actually stating the number out loud.
It is terrifying, but we have a linguistic cheat code here. Let's look at the exact phrasing you should use. Based on my research of the current market data for this specific role and my level of experience, I was hoping we could explore a base salary in the range of $95,000 to $105,000.
Let's do a microanalysis of that sentence.
Yeah.
Because every single word is doing heavy lifting. I was hoping we could explore.
It is an incredibly deliberate grammatical choice. Notice the use of the past continuous tense, I was hoping. In English, this specific tense softens the request significantly. It completely removes the aggressive, combative edge that comes with a direct present tense demand like I want or I need. It creates a polite, almost hypothetical space for the conversation.
And the word explore is a masterpiece of negotiation linguistics.
Why does explore work so well?
Because it implies a journey you are taking together. It is not a take it or leave it ultimatum. You're saying, pay me this or I walk out the door. You are inviting the hiring manager to look at the landscape of possibilities with you. It keeps the tone perfectly collaborative.
Precisely. You are partnering with them to solve a budget puzzle. And furthermore, notice how the ask is framed in the range of $95,000 to $105,000. You do not give a single rigid number.
Let me push back on that, though. If I give an employer a range of 95 to 105, doesn't that just absolutely guarantee they will pick the lowest number in that range? Why would they ever offer the top?
They almost certainly will pick the bottom of the range, which is exactly why your target number, the number you actually want to walk away with, should be at the very bottom of the range you provide.
Oh. So if I want 95, I ask for 95 to 105.
Exactly. Giving a range achieves two critical psychological goals. First, it demonstrates flexibility. It shows you are a reasonable professional who is willing to negotiate, not a dictator making demands.
That makes sense.
Second, it successfully anchors the high end in the employer's mind. Even if they have zero intention of giving you $105,000, that high number pulls their perception of your value upward.
Yeah.
When they counter your offer at, say, $97,000, they feel like they won the negotiation because they talked you down from your top number, and you just got $2,000 above your actual target.
Yeah.
Everybody wins.
It is a complete Jedi mind trick.
It is.
But, okay, you have flawlessly executed the gratitude value ask framework. You've stated your range.
Yeah.
The words have left your mouth. Now we have to tackle what is universally described as the most psychologically agonizing part of the entire process. What happens the exact second you finish speaking?
You must embrace the golden silence. The rule here is absolute. Once you make your ask, you stop talking. Complete.
If we connect this to the bigger picture of human social behavior, this requires a superhuman amount of discipline. Because we are socially conditioned from birth to smooth over awkward silences.
We really are.
When there is a gap in conversation, our brains panic. We feel like we have offended the other person. We want to make the discomfort go away.
We absolutely do. And the adrenaline of the negotiation makes that panic 10 times worse. Your brain is screaming at you to say something, anything, to break the tension.
Right.
The worst possible thing you can do in this moment is to fill that silence by apologizing, justifying your request, or tragically lowering your own number before they even have a chance to respond.
Let's role play how bad that sounds.
Hey!
I was hoping we could explore the range of 95 to 105,000, but, I know budgets are tight right now, so if that's too much, 90 is totally fine too, or really whatever you think is fair. I'm just happy to be here.
It is painful to even hear. That exact behavior is kind of backpedaling, and it is considered a cardinal sin of negotiation. You are literally negotiating against yourself. You just did the hiring manager's job for them, and you cost yourself thousands of dollars in the span of 5 seconds.
So what do? You just sit there and stare at them through the Zoom screen, or listen to the dead air on the phone.
Yes. You mute your microphone if you have to. You bite the inside of your cheek. You let the silence do the heavy lifting.
Wow.
You have to reframe how you view that silence. The silence is not a rejection. The silence is not them being angry at you. It is simply the necessary psychological space the employer needs to process your request, look at their budget notes, and formulate a professional response.
Okay, so you endure the 15 seconds of silence that feels like 15 years. Let's play out the scenarios. What actually happens next?
There are 3 likely scenarios that follow the silence. Scenario 1, they accept your counteroffer right there on the spot.
Which feels like winning the lottery.
It happens much more often than people think, especially if your ask is well-researched, grounded in solid market data, and respectfully presented. They might just look at their spreadsheet and say, you know what, that sounds reasonable, we can make that work.
Amazing. But realistically, they rarely just say yes right away.
Yeah.
They're going to try to negotiate, right?
Yep.
So scenario 2 is they meet you in the middle.
Scenario 2 is by far the most common outcome. You asked for a range starting at 95. Their initial offer was 85. The hiring manager says, let me talk to HR and see what we can do. They come back a day later and say, we can't quite hit 95, but we can do 91.
At that point, you smile and accept. Because you have successfully increased your baseline by $6,000 a year, which, as we established, will compound for the rest of your life.
Precisely. You graciously accept. But then there is scenario 3. This is the outcome everyone is terrified of. They hold firm on the original offer.
You hit the wall, they say, I'm sorry, we think you're great, but $85,000 is the absolute maximum we can offer for this role.
It feels like a massive defeat. It feels like a dead end. But this is exactly where amateur negotiators give up and expert negotiators pivot. This is actually a massive opportunity to deploy a concept called expanding the pie.
Expanding the pie. Because when you hit a wall on the base salary, your brain assumes the negotiation is over. You lost the game. But you haven't lost, because the base salary is just one single slice of the compensation pie.
Exactly. We need to define total compensation. In the U.S. corporate system, total compensation is far, far more than just a base salary. There's an entire menu of alternative financial levers you can pull.
Let's list these out and explain them, because I think a lot of people don't even know these things exist, let alone that they are negotiable. The biggest one is a signing bonus.
Yes, a signing bonus is a one-time lump sum payment given to you when you join the company. It is frequently used to bridge the gap when the base salary can't be moved.
Then there's equity or stock options,
which can be incredibly lucrative, especially at tech companies or publicly traded corporations. You are essentially negotiating for a piece of the company's future upside.
What about annual bonus targets?
If the base is fixed, you can ask if your performance bonus tier can be bumped. So instead of a target bonus of 10% of your salary, you negotiate for a 15% target.
Relocation assistance, flexible or hybrid work schedules, extra paid time off.
Paid time off, PTO, is a massive lever. An extra week of vacation has a very real, calculable monetary value, and it significantly improves your work-life balance.
You could also ask for professional development budgets, a better job title, or even a delayed start date so you can take a breather between jobs.
Exactly.
But here's the question. Why would a company that just told you they have absolutely no money for your base salary suddenly agree to give you a $10,000 signing bonus or an extra week of paid vacation? It seems contradictory.
To understand this, we have to look deeply at corporate finance and HR mechanics. Why are base salaries capped?
Right, why are they?
A hiring manager is almost always handcuffed by incredibly rigid internal HR salary bands. These bands exist to maintain internal equity, meaning they can't pay you vastly more than someone else already doing the job, and to ensure compliance with anti-discrimination laws.
Makes sense.
Furthermore, base salary is a recurring liability. A $10,000 raise isn't just $10,000, it's $10,000 every year, plus the compounding costs of benefits and future raises.
So the finance department tells the manager, a level 3 analyst can only be paid a maximum of $85,000, and the manager's hands are literally tied. The software won't even let them input a higher number.
Exactly. But, and this is the golden secret of total compensation, that same hiring manager usually has a high degree of discretionary power to pull from completely different operational budgets. They might have a separate one-time budget specifically allocated for recruitment bonuses, or they might have the authority to simply approve an extra week of vacation on their own because PTO doesn't require a cash outlay from the finance department today.
It's just like going to a fast food drive-thru and ordering a combo meal.
I love these analogies.
If you ask the shift manager to physically give you a larger burger patty, they might say, I literally can't do that. The menu rules dictate the burger is exactly a quarter pound. The register won't let me change the price.
Right.
But if you ask nicely, they might be perfectly happy to throw in an extra large order of fries and upgrade your drink for free just to keep you happy as a customer.
The core item is structurally fixed, but the periphery is completely flexible.
That is exactly how corporate budgeting works. Pivoting to these alternative levers isn't settling. It's a highly strategic maneuver to increase the overall monetary value of your package when the base salary hits a structural wall.
But how do you seamlessly transition to this without sounding greedy? Because if we role play this out, you just asked for more money, they said no, and now you're immediately asking for more vacation time. It feels like you're just grasping at straws.
You have to execute the pivot gracefully. You use a script that validates their constraint and then immediately opens a new door. Let's hear the script.
You say, I completely understand that the base salary is fixed within the current HR band, and I really appreciate you being transparent with me about that constraint. Given that the base is firm, would it be possible to explore some flexibility in other areas of the total compensation package? For instance, to help bridge the gap between the offer and my market research, I'd love to discuss the possibility of a signing bonus, or perhaps adding an extra week of paid time off.
Wow, it is so graceful. You validate their reality, you thank them for their honesty, and then you pivot directly to a new solution.
Exactly.
Now, having covered all these tactical frameworks, the deflection, the gratitude value ask, the golden silence, the total comp pivot, we need to pause and address a very specific, pervasive mental block. Because there's an entire demographic of highly skilled, brilliant professionals who are listening to this right now and thinking, this is great for you, but I am terrified to use any of these tools because of my legal status.
You are referring to the massive psychological burden carried by international candidates and the misconceptions surrounding work visas.
Yes. We have to talk about the H-1B and L-1 visa reality in the U.S. There is a damaging, deeply ingrained misconception that international candidates who require visa sponsorship are in a position of inherent weakness.
It's so common.
The internal monologue is, because I need this employer to maintain my legal status to stay in the country, I have zero leverage. I should just gratefully accept whatever crumbs they offer me, keep my head down, and pray they don't fire me.
This is a devastatingly common fear, and it results in international workers leaving millions of dollars on the table. We need to completely reframe this dynamic by looking at the reality of how visa sponsorship actually works from the corporation's perspective.
Let's break down the employer's burden.
Sponsoring a work visa in the United States requires significant financial expense from the company. We are talking about thousands of dollars in legal fees to immigration attorneys. It requires a massive administrative burden from the HR department. It involves filing complex labor condition applications. It requires waiting periods that can last for months.
It is a huge, expensive hassle for the company.
Exactly. So apply basic business logic here. If a U.S. corporation is willing to go through all of that expense, all of that legal red tape, and all of those delays to sponsor you, what does that objectively mean?
It means you have incredibly unique, highly specialized skills that they could not easily find in the domestic labor market.
Precisely. They aren't doing it as a charity. They are doing it because they desperately need your specific brain. The very fact that they are willing to sponsor your visa is empirical proof of your massive leverage.
Wow.
You are not a burden to them. You are a premium, hard-to-find asset.
That completely flips the script.
And it goes beyond just leverage. There are actual legal protections built into the system that people don't understand. Under U.S. immigration law, specifically governed by the Department of Labor, companies sponsoring these visas are legally required to pay the foreign worker what is called the prevailing wage for their specific role and geographic location.
Wait, what is the prevailing wage?
It is a government-mandated baseline. This regulatory protection was actually designed to ensure that companies aren't undercutting domestic salaries by bringing in and exploiting cheap international labor.
Oh, interesting.
But the byproduct of this law is that it provides a legally enforceable floor for your negotiation. The company literally cannot pay you below market rate without violating federal law. So the law itself backs up your negotiation.
That reframing is so empowering for anyone listening who feels trapped by their visa status. But there is one more institutional flaw we have to address.
Okay.
It plagues everyone. Domestic workers, visa holders, entry-level kids, and senior executives alike. The ultimate nightmare scenario.
The rescinded offer.
Yes, you do everything right. You do your market research. You use the gratitude value ask framework. You use the past continuous tense. But the employer gets so offended that you dared to ask for more money that they just snap and say, you know what? Never mind. You're too difficult. The offer is permanently rescinded. Goodbye.
The fear of the rescinded offer. It is the absolute boogeyman of salary negotiation.
Does it actually happen? Because it feels like a very real threat when you're in the hot seat.
Does it happen? Very, very rarely. Is it something you should base your strategy on? Absolutely not.
Really?
Legitimate, reputable organizations fundamentally expect negotiation. It is a standard, everyday business practice. Rescinding an offer purely because a candidate politely and professionally advocated for their market value is incredibly irrational business behavior.
Let's think about the sunk cost we discussed earlier.
Yeah.
The company has spent thousands of dollars in recruiter time. They have spent dozens of hours of executive time interviewing you. To throw all of that away, go back to square one and leave the position empty for another 2 months just because you politely asked for a $5,000 signing bonus? It makes no financial sense.
Right. They would lose exponentially more money in lost productivity while the role remains vacant than they would by simply giving you the signing bonus or meeting you in the middle.
But what if they do? What if you run into that 1 in a million hiring manager with a massive ego and they actually rescind the offer over a polite request?
then you have just been handed the most valuable piece of information possible.
How so?
If a company does punish polite professional advocacy by rescinding an offer, what does that instantly tell you about their internal culture?
It tells you that they are an absolute nightmare to work for.
It reveals a deeply toxic, authoritarian, punitive corporate culture. Think about it. If they are that hostile and unreasonable before you even sign the employment paperwork, during the phase where they are supposed to be on their best behavior trying to woo you, imagine how they will treat you when you actually work there. Imagine asking that manager for a promotion in 2 years. Imagine asking them for a week off because you have a family medical emergency.
It would be miserable.
It would be soul-crushing. If an offer is rescinded simply because you executed a polite, data-backed negotiation, you didn't lose a job. You dodged a bullet.
That is such a crucial mindset shift. You are interviewing them just as much as they are interviewing you. Negotiation is your first real test of how they handle conflict and collaboration.
Absolutely.
Which brings us to the final steps. No matter what the outcome is, whether you get the $1 million bump, whether you compromise in the middle, or whether you pivot to an extra week of vacation, how do you cleanly close this process out?
You close the conversation the exact same way you opened it. By reaffirming your enthusiasm and commitment, you want to leave a gracious, highly professional impression.
Even if they said no to the money.
Even if the negotiation was tough, you say, "Thank you so much for working through this with me. I appreciate your transparency. I'm thrilled about the opportunity to join the team, and I can't wait to get started and start contributing." You ensure the last taste in their mouth is overwhelmingly positive.
And the most important logistical takeaway for operating in the U.S. system, verbal agreements are just pleasantries.
They mean nothing.
Right. A hiring manager saying on the phone, "Yeah, I talked to HR, we can probably do an extra $5,000 on the base and a sign-on bonus," means absolutely nothing until it is formalized.
That is critical.
Yeah.
You must get the final agreed-upon terms, the comprehensive total compensation package in writing to protect yourself. You politely ask for a revised offer letter, and you review that document meticulously to ensure every negotiated point is included before you sign your name.
Wow. We have covered an immense amount of ground today. This really is a complete end-to-end toolkit. Let's do a rapid-fire recap of the arsenal you now have for your next career move.
Let's do it.
First, we learned to manage the timeline and protect our leverage. You let the employer speak first. If a recruiter asks for your number on day one, you deflect by expressing a desire to learn the full scope of the role.
Right.
You wait until they extend an official offer, utilizing their sunk cost, because that is your moment of maximum leverage.
Perfect.
Second, the pregnant pause. You fight the biological urge to accept on the spot. You buy 1 to 3 days to breathe, let the adrenaline fade, and do your rigorous research. You determine your exact geographic market value using transparent tools like Glassdoor, Levels.fyi, and the Bureau of Labor Statistics.
Crucial step.
Third, the execution. You deploy the gratitude value ask framework. You disarm them with excitement. You build a business case based on your objective ROI, never your personal expenses or rent. And you make your ask using the past continuous tense to soften the request, anchoring your target at the bottom of a range.
The Jedi mind trick.
Fourth, the golden silence. You state your number and you shut your mouth. You embrace the agonizing awkwardness and you never, ever backpedal against yourself.
Let the silence do the work.
Fifth, expanding the pie. If the base salary hits a rigid HR wall, you don't give up. You pivot to total compensation. You negotiate signing bonuses from operational budgets, equity, PTO, or flexible work schedules.
Expand the pie.
And finally, you remember your inherent worth. Whether you are an international candidate on an H-1B visa backed by prevailing wage laws, or a domestic worker, your skills have tangible value. Legitimate companies expect you to negotiate, and you must always, always get the final deal in writing.
It is a phenomenal framework. It completely takes the mystery, the panic, and the raw emotion out of the process and replaces it with cold, effective strategy.
Now, before we sign off, I know you always like to leave us with something to chew on, something that takes everything we just learned and pushes it into a completely new context.
I do. And thinking about this entire framework, specifically the psychological and linguistic tools we discussed, I want to leave you, the listener, with a provocative thought.
Okay, let's hear it.
We have spent this entire deep dive talking about corporate boardrooms, HR managers, salary bands, and million-dollar career trajectories. But think about how the skill of anchoring, or using the gratitude value ask framework, might apply far outside the confines of the office.
Oh, interesting.
Could this exact linguistic strategy be the secret to negotiating in our complex personal relationships?
Oh, wow, like at home.
Exactly. Imagine you are dividing household chores with a stubborn roommate. Or, you are trying to plan a highly complex, potentially stressful family vacation with your in-laws, and nobody can agree on the budget or the destination.
A nightmare scenario.
Right. But what happens if you apply these exact same tools? What if you soften a personal request with the past continuous tense I was hoping we could explore? What if you intentionally shift the focus away from your own personal complaints and grievances and instead focus entirely on the mutual value and harmony created for everyone involved? Does the intense anxiety of personal conflict evaporate the exact same way the anxiety of corporate negotiation does when you apply a logical framework?
Yeah.
It is absolutely worth testing in your own life.
Oh, that is brilliant. I was hoping we could explore you doing the dishes on Tuesdays so we can maintain a more harmonious living space.
Oh,
I am absolutely using that this weekend.
it works.
Well, that is all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. We hope you take these insights, push past the visceral anxiety, and boldly advocate for your worth in the real world.
Keep questioning the assumptions, understand your leverage, and always keep expanding the pie.
We'll see you next time.